Mic check. Mic check. Hello. Oh, I got a thumbs up. Thank you. Great call on that mobile app tweet, Taylor.
Hey, can everybody hear me? Everybody's on mute.
I got you.
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going? Hey, so who's gonna kick this thing off? Santiago or?
We can't hear you, Santi, if you're speaking. But I think he said he had a conflicting work meeting. If he can't talk. Took a little while to get rolling last time. There he goes. Okay. Said he, Santiago said he has an audio issue in the chat.
Okay, that's good. Guess we'll give everybody a few more minutes.
Is this streaming on Twitter too? Oh yeah, he said live on YouTube and Twitch. Santiago said that we could get started as soon as we're ready.
All right. So do you wanna get us kicked off, Handshake Jesus?
No, go for it. Or maybe Noel could just get it started.
Yeah, sure. We can focus the beginning of the call on the Handshake V2 proposal that Andrew and I have worked on over the past month or so. And then we can focus on other things that are going on within the community, whether other proposals or seems like we have some interesting projects that are being worked on, which is exciting. So what is Handshake V2? Before we get there, let's first ask ourselves, what are the existential problems that face Handshake in the community today? Just to name a few, the main core developers like Zipkin had to find full-time jobs outside of Handshake. There's been limited awareness about Handshake over the years. Building primarily comes from our small community of developers. Most businesses and developers involved with Handshake over the years have left due to lack of support and traction. Existing businesses like Namebase and miners like Bitmain are operating at major losses. There's low demand for the HNS coin, and there are no major integrations or exchange listings as of the year 2024. So if we're being objective, I think we can all agree that these points are true. What's debatable, though, is what's most important and what should we try to solve for. Now, the Handshake V2 proposal ambitiously attempts to solve for these core issues, and I do believe these are core issues, what I've listed. And while there is a proposed entity, which could be a company or nonprofit, to help with coordination and solidarity, this proposal has multiple layers to maximize community involvement while growing the HNS ecosystem. And I do believe that funding core developers is a starting point that most agree on, but more needs to be done in order for Handshake to gain adoption and have a thriving ecosystem. The Handshake V2 proposal is posted on GitHub for everyone to review. In addition to this conversation that we're about to have, I also recommend watching a recent SkyInclude interview with Mike McLeany. And there are also a few articles on HTX's Substack that details why I'm in favor of a hard fork and the overall vision. Now, I'll read through the simplified guide for Handshake V2 before we get to questions, just to provide an overview for those that haven't had time to review the proposal in full on GitHub. So in summary, the Handshake V2 proposal consists of 4 main components. The first of which is reallocating the unclaimed airdrop, establishing a entity like a company or nonprofit to kickstart Handshake V2, developing a HNS native L2, and making the remaining reserved names claimable. And by that I mean ICANN TLDs and the Alexa Top 10K. Now the airdrop reallocation breakdown. The allocation of 890 million HNS coin, which was originally designated for open source developers to help with adoption for Handshake, and they weren't claimed. They're going to be redistributed to community members based on their historical and prospective contributions to Handshake. So whereas previously the open source airdrop and the $10.2 million that was raised that were given to nonprofits was an altruistic endeavor, this focus is about gaining adoption for Handshake by replenishing the ecosystem and giving life to the ecosystem. So half of the overall airdrop will be going to the following groups or airdrop, the different layers of airdrop. So 20% of the overall 890 million HNS would be going to an HNS V2 entity, and what they would be focused on, and I would be helping lead with that. They would be coordinating the hard fork and kickstarting the Handshake V2. They'd be selling a good portion of the funds to an investor group in order to raise USD in order to accomplish all of these tasks outlined. So there would be no zero dumping on exchanges for any HNS received for the HNS V2 entity. We would be developing an HNS native L2, and smart contracts enable on-chain SLD mints and TLD token issuances. We would be building an application on the L2 for social media creators and online communities. We'd be helping lead the community and determining future governance. And we would also be working with browsers and exchanges to integrate Handshake. Next, 35% will be allocated to inaugural groups that have been adding value to HNS. You can look at the list, and we're open to community input. One of the groups is the HSD core developers, so that way they can focus on Handshake full time. And we are open to other HNS community recommendations. 10% to TLDs with SLDs, so this is to those that have built communities around their TLDs already. Allocated to cutoff inaugural groups to reward these communities, the first of which has already passed, and that includes off-chain registries. And then the second cutoff would be at the beginning part of 2025, which would encourage, and this only applies to on-chain registries, and this would encourage newcomers as well as other community participants to register, stake, and build communities around their TLDs. So this is one mechanism to increase chain activity here in the short term. And then the last airdrop as part of this initial set is 10% to all TLD owners. And we prefer quality over quantity, so the airdrop amount will be proportional to the amount burned at the last auction for the HNS name, and this will prevent bad actors and spam. Having said that, half of the overall 890 million HNS is going to remain to expand HNS ecosystem through, we call it a Republic of TLDs. We'd be setting up some sort of decentralized governance framework to fund future community development and other projects that would be part of the HNS ecosystem. Now, this would involve quite a bit of work. We don't want to, this would fund the ecosystem going forward for the long term, so we don't want to rush and set up a centralized entity that would manage all of these funds, or a small multi-sig decentralized all these funds. We want to be very thoughtful with this. There has been research in this, including Joseph Boone wrote a paper in regards to the Handshake guild system that would involve continual hard forks. We don't think that we have to follow that, but we need to ideally we would set something up on a L2, such as Footnote, where communities can be able to propose projects and have those projects funded. Lastly, in regards to the reserve name claims, this would involve unlocking the Alexa Top 10K and ICANN for claiming. I do view this as crucial, seeing that the soft fork that commenced in early February of this year ended up locking up the Alexa Top 10K and the ICANN TLDs. So this will make them claimable again, so we can get back to that in order for the VeriSigns or whoever of the world to claim their HNS TLD counterpart. We're also suggesting this did come along with 188 million HNS coin, and we're just suggesting to just remove that from the total supply, seeing that they aren't technically an issuance. Now, with that being said, Andrew, feel free to add anything else, and we can open up for questions. Can y'all still hear me?
Yeah. Thanks for going over all that. Yeah, I don't have anything to add. That was very thorough. I guess we can open it up for questions to anybody else. I know there are a lot of questions in the GitHub as well.
I can get us started as far as questions go. We could also put them in the chat, maybe, and take an occasional peek down there to see what the questions are. You mentioned a few times, Noel, in that proposal, which I appreciate you taking the time to explain and write up so thoughtfully. You mentioned a couple times in there governance, and I'm curious about what exactly did you mean by that, and what what is the vision for how that would be executed?
Andrew, would you want to touch on the Republic of TLDs? Yeah, so part of this, I prefer Andrew to share on the Republic of TLDs, seeing that you've been thinking about it.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as governance on Handshake is concerned, I mean, we haven't had any consensus changes, other than the soft fork that prevented the 100,000 Alexa from being claimable, which was non-controversial. Other than that consensus change, we haven't had any consensus changes to the protocol. Thus. Or any funding events from the protocol, because the protocol didn't have any funds or doesn't have any funds. And so there hasn't been any consensus issues to speak of since launch, with the exception of the aforementioned software. Going forward, though, I mean, the question is, it's also, I mean, that's good from the perspective of ossifying the protocol. But as as a lot of the issues that Noel mentioned in terms of adoption and things like that, it's also prevented us from making any furthering the protocol either. So I mean, it's just basically from a governance perspective, it's been static. This proposal, the Handshake V2, or any of the hard fork proposals that have come about, are, I would say, the first major kind of consensus change within the Handshake community since launch, and this proposal considers that, hey, maybe this isn't the only consensus change we make to Handshake in the future, right? And so I think the deeper philosophical question that this Handshake community is collectively exploring is whether a proof of work blockchain can iterate. Iterate in any sense of the word, and form kind of governance around it. And so the kind of the philosophy or thought process behind Handshake V2 is that, hey, this probably isn't the perfect solution, right? Which is why 450 out of the 900 or so million HNS are being kind of reserved for future proposals that come about. And so then comes the question as to how do we kind of again gain consensus so that it's and how do we make it easier for Handshake V3 for the next iteration, and so with that, one of the ideas that the Handshake V2 contemplates and introduces is this notion that the TLDs, people who own TLDs, handshake names, will kind of be the participants for any future governance changes. It can relate to coin allocation, but not limited to coin reallocation. So the 450 remaining HNS, it could be anything else. It could related to kind of any changes to the Handshake protocol. That's what the Republic of TLD alludes to. Currently, I think one of the issues that we're having at the moment, relating to these proposals and kind of gaining consensus around it, is that proof of work blockchains kind of don't have a mechanism for drastic changes to changes related to hard fork, which is why if you kind of think about it, Bitcoin's had very little changes. If at all, really, besides kind of bug fixes on the consensus layer. I can't, I think even Zcash or other proof of work blockchains that do more frequent hard forks haven't really had a drastic change in how they work. So no, I think this gets to a more philosophical question as to can proof of work blockchains iterate at all? iterate on its vision, iterate on its strategies, and things like that. And so I think this is an important moment for not only the Handshake community, but the broader crypto community as well.
That has me thinking, and I appreciate that response. Zcash has made a lot of changes, just to use them as an example, and they're actually moving from proof of work to proof of stake. And in asking that question and hearing it mentioned, the term governance a few times, it has me thinking about our current situation and how we've been relying on polls, or we're actually searching for some type of consensus mechanism right now. And, because I don't think we're in a hurry, although there are some timeline dates that are set in this proposal that I think probably put an undue pressure on us as a community to make a decision. I think this is large enough that, to put dates on it, like 2025 or, January, 2025 is sort of the end date or the beginning of something, may be unwise. But it has me thinking that we sort of need some type of governance system now to even make this decision. I'm curious what people think about that, because this could be the biggest decision in the history of Handshake, and to do so without a governance system in place as sort of our primary initiative seems a little hasty and a little irresponsible because of it. It's obviously protocol level changes is one type of consensus, but we're also talking about managing a lot of money and making a lot of decisions together. So, one thing that is just occurring to me as everyone begins to throw out proposals and we start to try to come up with different ideas for reallocation, it's becoming more and more clear that we need a governance system to make these decisions. What are your thoughts on that, group?
So I'll go on this. I see a lot of different. I've said this before. I see a lot of different perspectives on this, and I think I think Andrew said something that's kind of fundamental. And I see not just in Handshake, but I see a lot of places, because basically my project means I have to be in over 70 Discord servers, so I'm in a lot of communities, both on proof of stake, proof of work, and like just different cultures in general, of like subcultures within the space. And what I see as a fundamental thing, especially with governance, is you have really two sides. Some of them might consider it, if you want to be political about it, you might consider almost Democrats versus Republicans. I actually have another founder in the Cardano community who basically referred to this about which is better, proof of stake versus proof of work, and it's like, and it puts you on the side of Democrats, Republicans as comparison. And what I see realistically is that you're either following the bucket of an on-chain DAO that votes for how the governance should work and how the change should operate, and that's basically Ethereum, or you're basically doing governance through violence with Bitcoin. That's basically what it comes down to. And my opinion is, in general, is that Bitcoin's biggest mistake is that the all of the narratives around it causing it to ossify and not change anything. I think that's a huge mistake. So I am pro for iteration and innovation. And since what Ethereum is doing, like it about seeing where it makes mistakes and try to improve on them, but not irresponsibly. But I also think that where Bitcoin does best is where you don't use money always directly to decide on votes or anything, but it's also where the consensus is very rough. And it's also in some ways like Linux, where the consensus is very rough. And I actually think that's actually a good thing. I think that you could have a DAOs or groups that help decide things, but I do not think that having going to an Ethereum style consensus mechanism is a good idea whatsoever. I think what we have, I think we might could have a better organization on communication and consensus, but I don't really think that we need to be having like any like Ethereum consensus stuff. I also think that asking about the question, can a proof of work blockchain um, iterate rapidly? I think that's a wrong question, because in the day, proof of chain blockchain is really just a technical engineering problem, because the only reason that a proof of work blockchain does not have an on-chain governance is culture. There's no reason whatsoever from an engineering standpoint that you cannot create an on-chain DAO is built into a proof of work blockchain. There's no reason you couldn't do it. It just isn't done because it's culture between Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I think asking whether or not proof of work blockchain can have that is a wrong question. It's really a question of how should be governance in general, because it's not really about proof of works versus proof of stake. It's the culture of governance in general, and our culture has stemmed from Bitcoin. It's not stemmed from Ethereum. So you really should be focusing on the culture of the governance, not if it's not what the security mechanism is. So in general, I see this as basically pro innovation, but pro Bitcoin culture as well, and trying to shoehorn and migrate consensus to Ethereum is kind of leaning too much on that side of things. And while I do agree we need better coordination, I think that we need to be very careful in how we do that, because the Bitcoin way of doing things is not bad, and I definitely do not want to see a situation where we're going to Ethereum pay to play, basically. That's all for now. If anyone else wants to speak, go ahead.
Yes. You know, when we asked that question,
Irony. The thing is that no one really who has that position has actually come in the chat, which is kind of tells its own story. Put that way.
Let me say this though. I said in our group DM that I would even take that position if nobody decided to talk. And actually, when I asked people if they were interested in it, first of all, there are time zone stuff that we're trying to fix here, but to be that person at least for a second, and even to back up a little bit on the proof of work governance. I mean, there are thresholds to the nodes running the software and how things are activated, and that's basically, governance on a proof of work system. But this is again, when I am talking to the guys that just the community members that are against a reallocation, it's getting more and more nuanced about why. However, it does bring me back again to this concept of some sort of governance from the get-go here, that someone actually, which I thought was genius, referred to it as minimum viable governance, an MVG, in that even these people that aren't showing up for this call, they have a voice. They feel incredibly passionate about against the reallocation. But again, it's got me even kind of taking a meta step back and saying, rather than just trying to push this through, and why not meticulously and patiently kind of set up a system where where even if people show up or don't show up for a talk like this, for various reasons, whether it's language, timing, what have you, they still are able to participate in governance. What came to my mind in that moment actually was the Ethereum hard fork, and just how few people actually participated in that, and how it was almost, and this is arguable, but almost intentionally confusing and quick. I can't remember the term that was used, but it was like some rapid response situation. And there's kind of both ends of the spectrum there. There's a Bitcoin upgrade, which takes, years and years of deliberation, if anything. And then there's, the state change that happened after the DAO exploit, which was basically, pushed through by a very small group. And so again, I'm, and this is not really my idea. I was kind of educated to the necessity for this, but because there's such a clear and glaring lack of a minimum viable governance, it seems prudent and responsible, particularly as in this V2 proposal, there's lots of talk of governance, for us to kind of have some minimum viable consensus around what might even be a minimum viable voting mechanism on this issue. So I think that, for many reasons, the voice of just burn it or just make it unclaimable. These are real people. You see people in the chats, the telegrams, you see people in the discords saying, let's leave it alone. Let's just burn it. And, even in the polls, which are about 50-50, you're seeing this hesitance to reallocate, and even, a passionate response against it. But if we're ever going to get to the point of making a fair decision, I think that having a minimum viable governance conversation is very responsible, and seems like something that, if we didn't begin with that, it's not to say that we don't end up in the same place in terms of how the voting goes down, but to be able to install this so folks can actually vote, and that it means something and actually counts. One thing I've heard from a lot of the opponents to the reallocation is that we've been having this conversation every year. And I was kind of sounding the alarm, privately DMing people like, hey guys, this is happening. So, and there's a little bit of inertia there, but I think once people saw the V2 proposal and Noel tweeting revolution, it's waking people up. And so I think that their lack of representation here is noteworthy, right? When I asked if they were going to attend, and we're talking about a handful of people, they just kind of laughed about it. So the interesting thing there is that's a very, I mean, we could get into the weeds about why that is. However, I'm wondering if what other people think about this minimum viable governance piece as we set out on discussing an enormous decision like this and eventually making it.
I personally think that I'm not against having a governance system. I am against having a governance system being tied to the blockchain. Basically, if you want to have some sort of governance that's completely separate, where it's kind of like altruistic, where people just volunteer and they can actually go and vote, and we have a central place, a central community to discuss things. I think that's very different than if you're doing something on chain. So I think that should be clarified. If you want to have a minimal governance, I don't think that's an issue in the sense of just voting and having a place where everyone can just go to see what the community is thinking as a collective. But I do not think that should be in any way actually connected or linked to the blockchain itself, because then that gets you into a lot of perverse incentives and gets you a bit more over to the Ethereum side of things. So yeah, and I think that quite frankly, Ethereum, some other proof of work chains like Ethereum and Bitcoin could have done that, but their culture makes them a bit too. It makes it a bit blasphemy for them to do it now. But so I do think that is reasonable. It's just a matter of how you implement that and not try to have it not try to have it, I guess, too tied into the system.
Good point. Other thoughts about how we might do minimum viable governance in order to handle this huge decision?
I'll make some general comments, and hopefully others can offer ideas on. This is something obviously in the long term that we wanted to do, but there is definitely there's definitely truth on perhaps this should be focused on more. So first, I do think it was impressive how we came together on the soft fork, but it's also true that it didn't involve like a reallocation, right? But we were able to reach full consensus there to make some pretty decent changes. In regards to this, yeah, we're trying, as of now, we're trying to work within our current structures, for proof of work, just be able to have these conversations on GitHub. But I do, as part of having these conversations, it would be nice to be able to reach a consensus. Although, to your point, whether those on this call or those that are for pro burn, it definitely seems that we are quite a bit away from being able to reach that threshold necessary, right? So if anyone else has ideas on how we can have like more of that minimum viable governance, which hopefully would be something that we could whip up a little bit quicker than our obvious future goal would be to have it done like on an L2 and be able to leverage our TLDs and so on in order to do voting. If someone has an idea for the MVG, I'm definitely open to hearing that.
That. Go ahead. No, please.
So basically DPoS, but it's more where it's separated from the blockchain and not actually tied into your ownership or control what you have on the chain. Because I actually thought that you could somehow link your HNS name to cross chains to be able to have an identity. Because the biggest thing I have with this is anyone who wants to be malicious about any of this consensus, apparently, especially with the money, could frankly just do a seal bill attack on it and bullshit the votes. And so the reality is, I see is that anyone who does this, you actually want some transparency on it, on what identities are actually voting. And if you notice, like 500 people with bullshit names that are voting for A, B, or C, it's going to be quite kind of fucking obvious for what somebody's doing. But from devil's advocate point of view, the first thing I ask whenever you're doing any type of voting system on chain, money or not money, is how you going to deal with civil bill attacks.
Yeah, I think that like workshopping a minimum viable governance that we could upvote or downvote or get some consensus on would be amazing. One thing I wanted to say about the opposition when it came to my mind, and this is, I'm saying this to everybody because of the kind of 50-50 split that it seems like we're on. And this, I think, is a credit to H&S Broker. H&S Broker, who we all know by that name, has been very outspoken against the reallocation and wants to do a burn, and with all the same love for H&S that we have, and the same reality orientation, or objective look at where we are. However, and this is a part of almost curating this conversation too, he actually came off his stance, which he said he was embarrassed about or wanted to blow his brains out or something like that. Maybe he called himself a bitch. I can't remember. Something to that effect. But he actually came off that hardline stance and said, why don't we allocate 10% to protocol level development, I think is what it was. But the point is not so much the specifics, but the fact that we were able to find the hardest outside liner coming in to find common ground or some type of compromise. And I think that's also an important piece. I want to recognize that in him. And I also want to recognize that in other folks that are against the reallocation as a knee-jerk response in a lot of ways, as the first introduction, oh, hell no. But then when going deep into it, start to then say, okay, well, maybe that would be a good idea. And I guess that's, I in the last call, I was advocating patience, and I've been doing that throughout. I would say the same thing even with Paul's proposal. It had a timeline on it, so it had to be closed, but a 2-week timeline to discuss, like we were going to come to some consensus in that time, isn't realistic. But I see us working toward like compromises. And the reason I say that is for the flip side, that the initiative on the V2 proposal has been awesome. And that said, there has to be a way, or ideally with a minimum viable governance, there's a way that we can sort of make changes to it, or start to curate, all right, this is good, but we like these parts, but maybe these parts are too outside or too hard to find. But again, there's two things I'm really saying. It's provide the space and the time to have the conversation, because we are finding compromises, which is amazing. I didn't think it would happen. I had to do a double take when I saw H&S Broker come off his hardline position. But it's a very hopeful move, even to his own shame. He was able to compromise, and And my hope is that that goes for all parties, right? I know that the V2 proposal has gotten, plenty of criticism, and, honing it and revising it and iterating on it obviously is going to take time. And I know that there are other proposals that people want to put forth as well. So, having the time and space to is actually, I think, very important, because that's what angers me when when I reflect on this. If it's something that's pushed through, right? And like Noel said, well, the current consensus or the current governance is at the minor level. So if we got the minors, then we're going to do this. But I see HNS Broker and Andre reaching right out to Bitmain and saying, "Hey, are you aware of this?" And they're like, "What?" So you've seen me bring up this idea of two chains, and I really don't think we want that. You can't stop that from happening. But again, I'm sort of putting a stake in the ground for a minimum viable governance product here. And here we go, Andre. Santiago just dropped something from Andre in the chat. But I wanted to just say, hey, there has been compromise. There has been folks from the burn camp coming toward the middle, so to speak. And at the same time, the more we have this conversation, the more it's clearly chaos and anarchy in the literal sense of the word. And I just wanted to put a stake in the ground for a governance system as we get started on all these huge conversations.
Hey, so
Yes. Oh yeah. So if you just to respond to this on the proposal that Andre came forward with, which is actually not doing anything on L1, right? It's basically like, hey, why doesn't this proposal do this independently as an L2? And not make any changes to L1. And, I mean, this L2 company obviously could do that. There would be no reason to gain consensus from the community to be able to do that. And they could do it independently. So I think that's his kind of I mean, I'm not even sure if that is a proposal. I mean, it's just a suggestion to the people pushing the Handshake V2 proposal. Hey, why don't you just do this independently as an L2? Don't touch anything on L1, and push this through. I mean, and so yeah, I spent a lot of time discussing with HNS Broker and Andre about a lot of different things, because I respect them as community members. I think they're very passionate about the project. They've been very helpful in many regards, helpful kind of community members. Related to this, I do think they're kind of shy, or maybe English isn't the first language, or maybe there's an issue with time zone. But they have like a reluctance to join these calls. Just to kind of frame their point, I think this proposal is not really a proposal at all. And then, practically speaking, as Handshake V2 company, the issue with this proposal, or suggestion, really is that it would be kind of difficult to pull off in this way, just due to the current market cap of Handshake, or of HNS. So if you were to raise money to do an L2, the way I think a lot of investors would see this is that your valuation's capped to whatever the sum of all ETH L2s are relative to ETH market cap, which may be somewhere around 20%. So if the potential for the Handshake L2 is capped at 20%, you're really looking at less than $2 million in terms of the total opportunity. for Handshake V2. I mean, I'm just talking, practically, realistically, as someone who's raised, capital for several different crypto projects. That's how they would view this opportunity. And if you were capped to a $2 million valuation and you sold even 20% of that, all you could really raise is 400K, which may not be enough to do everything kind of Handshake V2 wants to do. Furthermore, it doesn't address a lot of the challenges that Handshake L1 has, like, exchange integrations, Brave integrations, etc. This Handshake V2 or Handshake L2 company would not have the funds. One, it would not have the funds nor the obligation to tackle those challenges. And so I mean that's why I don't think this is what Andre posted there. I talked to him kind of after he posted that, and I think he understands where I'm coming from regarding to that. One, this is not a proposal, this is a suggestion, and these are challenges with the suggestion related to kind of like the resources that could be raised for this type of idea. But other, kind of to, yeah, but I do think it's important. I mean, I value HNS Broker and Andre as kind of the, the side that's reluctant to make any changes. I think someone had a question like why I compared this to Bitcoin. It was kind of an appeal to them because their position is, as far as I can tell, that Handshake has no problems. There's no problems in the community, and it's going just fine. Brave will one day integrate for free. It'll eventually get listed on exchanges like Coinbase, etc. If enough community members kind of nag them, and that everything related to Handshake's going fine. And just like and my response to that is that. Handshake does. There's a lot of things. All of us that kind of are involved in the community are tend to be kind of fans of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin strategy and approach and things like that. But what I've been kind of like trying to my response to Andre and HNS Broker was like, well, a lot of these strategies, a lot of these advantages that or a lot of the things that Bitcoin did, it's possible that it could have only it only works for the first mover, in the sense that Bitcoin was first. They had, they could do this kind of immaculate inception, although Satoshi mined 1 million Handshake, which is, 5% of the supply, which is way more than 5 million of the fully diluted supply, which is way more than, whatever the initial allocation was. Only done the founding group for Handshake. This, I mean, besides just the mining and the coins part of things, there's just a lot of aspects of Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin gravitated all the attention to itself. It was the only cryptocurrency for a very long time. Today in Handshake, we have to compete with thousands of other Handshake or other cryptocurrencies. So it doesn't have the ability to gravitate all the world's internet attention to itself, because it wasn't, first. For a million different reasons, I think the Bitcoin strategy, the Bitcoin approach, is one that that was only, it only worked once. And so, Handshake has to do something different. As part of, the group that kind of helped think about and design the mechanisms for Handshake, we were fully aware that this was a possibility. We were fully aware that, because Handshake wasn't first, and wasn't the only cryptocurrency that was going to be introduced when it launches, that it needed something extra. Which is why so much effort was designed around this airdrop. Even publishing cryptography papers with Dan Bonnet at Stanford and such to make these airdrops claims private. I mean, but our underlying assumption was that the vast majority of the open source airdrop would be claimed. I think there's some people in the community that view, hey, this is the design that we wanted. No, there's no way. We didn't even discuss like, hey, what if less than 10% or less than 5% of these coins are claimed? We did not imagine the scenario. And so the
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Please continue.
So we didn't imagine this as a scenario, and I do think this is a critical part that needs to be fixed in order for for this project to work out.
I want to address the Bitcoin piece really quickly because obviously there are some similarities, but I would think that, I mean, no one creating a cryptocurrency in this current market would, and no one is a generalization, anyone. It's hard to imagine someone creating a cryptocurrency in this current market without building in funding at the protocol level or somewhere. But obviously Bitcoin didn't do that. It was the first. It was a passion project. Businesses came in and built on it, and that's where Handshake is similar. The desire for Handshake to stay decentralized, like if you go look at the Twitter account, the official Twitter literally says this is not an official account. Now, the way that I see that is that Handshake is bigger than any single community. And I've mentioned this many times. There's 62 million potential communities that are here, and there's a lot more potentially than that because you can do subs of domains, et cetera, et cetera. That something as big as an alternative root zone, it's like a public utility. It's like a global public utility. And so to not have it run by a small cabal makes a lot of sense. And I think, there's something to that. However, right, I also think that this airdrop, and I'm probably the one that kids around and says, what if this was the plan the whole time? I'm playing, right? But I do think it's a blessing in disguise because we have the ability to recoup these funds and grow with them. But how we grow, I think, is part of these proposals, right? Because I still want it to seem like a curated public utility, right? We don't have VC funding in the same way. We don't want to do kind of like a Solana of alternate root zones. So there's a way we want to preserve it as it is. And one thing I often say, I haven't heard anyone say there aren't any problems, but I'll often say that Handshake works because it does work. That's undeniable. It may, and part of what we're trying to do is improve it, which is what an HIP is, right? A handshake improvement proposal. But fundamentally, it does work. It's just suboptimal. I would say the community itself is less functioning than the blockchain itself. So this is where I think a governance system, how do we organize? If we're going to reallocate all this money or some portion of it, shouldn't we consider how we're going to do that before we start out, right? Which is the MVP governance piece or the MVG. So I think there is that Bitcoin sort of ethos, and sort of the cypherpunk stuff coming from Matt and Mike Carson and, even me. But as we move along, that was 15 years ago. You see, Ethereum doing ICO, now they're proof of stake. You see Zcash moving, putting funding in at the protocol level and moving to proof of stake. You see Cardano with hundreds of millions of dollars of money printed basically from thin air, obviously bootstrapped by a $65 million ICO that provided liquidity and community building. So, there are governance precedents here. We're not just floating around in this world trying to organize. There are plenty of. I know you had said something about Joseph Poon writing about the guilds, but this would be an opportunity for real proposals, and I'm happy to take the initiative on this because I think it's so important. Real proposals around a minimum viable governance product that we can even use to make this decision. So there's various levels. There's protocol level decision making. There's funding level decision making, and we're moving into like a very governance heavy process here, right? And so if we can stay with a decentralized alt root zone that's like a global public utility, but have a foundation and have a community governance system that anybody could be involved with, really, truly, right? I think we can check a lot of boxes and do this in a responsible way that preserves sort of the original vision idea, while basically what we're doing is we're adding governance on top of it. And we did that, sort of we opened the door for this when we decided to do the soft fork. And so now that we're kind of in the realm of making protocol level decisions, consensus decisions, financial decisions, it seems like the proposal is one of governance. And so again, I'm wanting to build space in and time in for us to be thoughtful and prudent and meticulous about how we do this, because it is so important. What I disagree with would be anyone that says handshake doesn't work, or that we need to depart from the original vision for some reason. I think we need to add to it, build on it, upgrade some aspects. But I do think we can have it all if we're smart about how we go about this. If H&S Broker, Andre, all the dissenting voices can be heard, and that we have the time to come to a consensus with an agreed upon mechanism of doing so.
Eskimo, do you have something to say? Because I am also planning.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, I was
wondering.
trying to ask for a while now, like what the point of an L2 is when there's already a bunch of L2s that people are already using that are, working fine. What's the benefit of having an L2 for Handshake? I'm generally disagree with the L2 in general. I see any SLDs as pretty stupid in my opinion, but to have an official L2 versus the existing L2s, what's the point? And why should that be funded by this?
I guess, in terms of the handshake V2 or any of these proposals, rather, I think the more fundamental question is, should something be done at all, like at the protocol level? So I think if the answer to that is, if there's consensus around that question being yes, then we can explore, well, all right, so then how do we conclude on, what the format is, or what the vision is, or whatever, on how to kind of direct Handshake to kind of greener pastures. Before we get into the specifics, like in terms of like all the Handshake V2 type stuff, like, where the coins are going, or what it even is, I think is secondary to answering the question like, hey, should something be done? And then I think what Handshake Jesus here is proposing is like, all right, well, if we're going to do something, how do we come to a decision around that? And it may be premature, I guess, to discuss like specific proposals, specific allocations, all of those things, because like now I don't think neither Noel or I are married to any of those kinds of specifics. More broadly, I think a good place to gain consensus around is one, is Handshake doing fine? Is everything going to be okay? Is it on the right trajectory? And then two, if not so, what direction do we want to move as a community? And I think that's more important than diving deep into the specifics of the L2 or the V2.
The specifics are what is getting people on board or getting people to say I'm against this. So I think the specifics should be discussed, especially something like this, which is, to me, seems like funding a business that you want to start instead of actually improving Handshake, because anybody can just make a SLD L2 or use an existing one and make a business around it. It seems like you're trying to pull funding out of Handshake to create your own business doing that, in my opinion.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Eskimo, and I really appreciate having you part of the community and all of what you've done. Just a few thoughts that I have, and especially regarding to your letter on the Handshake V2 entity. The primary focuses, as have been mentioned on the call, is on elevating the HNS ecosystem as a whole. So I personally view the HNS L2 as being a public utility. Also, those browser integrations, exchange listings, they aren't going to happen on their own. I've had many conversations, Mozilla Foundation, I've met with many other exchanges too. We need to have a little bit more coordination there, and we're not going to be able to accomplish it as individuals.
I'm literally only disagreeing with the whole SLD thing. That's
the SLD thing?
SLDs just aren't right now.
Yeah,
they're not. I mean, thousands and thousands of SLDs have been sold, and there are zero websites hosted on them. There's no use for them.
Yeah. I mean, we
create a whole L2 out of the airdrop money that's just sitting there. Just doesn't make any sense, especially because, again, there's already other L2s on different chains.
Yeah,
Why?
to answer that directly, and others may have different views on it, but I would say at the very basic part, in general, an HNS L2 will ensure that all value created on top of the L2 is going to stay within the ecosystem. And I can speak from firsthand experience with HNS.id, or you can look at Pervious, or you can look at any of the other ones, including the off-chain registry with the name-based registry. What is the truth whenever you're registering these, whenever we're trying to create these communities on Handshake and bring value to Handshake? What ends up happening? You have to register and pay in USD, you have to pay in ETH, you're going to have to pay in ADA, most likely. And that, I think all those DSLD registries, I think that's fantastic. And I really want to be on every single chain, Cosmos, you name it. But it's all extracting, as what we've seen, extracting value or not bringing value at the very least to Handshake. And that's just the truth.
Nothing's stopping anybody from just selling DSLDs on Cardano, but accepting Handshake as payment. Nothing stopping that.
And hopefully that's considered and everything. But just from the very basics, this is very early stages. This is really a thought experiment as a community, whether this Handshake V2 proposal or any other ideas that are discussed. But with having a HNS L2 basically is going to create more. I view one of the issues with HNS coin, it's not the supply, but it's the demand. And while I was on the side of burning the coins for a number of years, just because I have more of a, I believe more in the Bitcoin ethos. I don't see that as an issue. We need to create more demand for it. Having an HNS L2 will basically mean that you're going to need the HNS, the coin, be able to port it over to L2 to register these domains. So that creates one use case for it in order to, I don't know if y'all are familiar with stacks on Bitcoin. That's Bitcoin's most prominent L2. It's been worked on for many years, but basically you stake, like their token, which, can be HNS the coin. And by doing so, securing the L2, and by doing so, you're actually earning HNS rewards based on transaction activity. So that could be with the SLD registration, sales, transfers. And so this is all bringing value and creating additional use cases for HNS coin. So that's why I think we can debate on whether or not it needs to be part of like a hard fork, right? But we've been talking about this for years, since 2020, that for those familiar with Footnote, that was nmd.co. Did anybody go there? That was a social network, like basically a test net L2 on Handshake. So we've been discussing this for years. I think we hopefully can agree that there could be value, but I definitely am on the side that I do believe that we should be on all the different chains as well. Hopefully that provides a little bit of insight.
I just see an L2 as a business opportunity for somebody to get an investment and build. I don't see it as anything to do with Handshake in general. So I would not approve like anything relating to
I guess
SLDs at all. Any L2.
Theoretically possible that an L2 could be a governance layer. But let me, Andrew said something, and to me, this is like the most important piece. He had brought us back, and excellent question, Eskimo, and an excellent answer, Noel, and it's giving me a lot of confidence in us because we're able to have these conversations, hard questions, and have answers.
Well, I'd honestly want to hear an answer from Andrew, though, because Andrew's the main concern I have about it. Given that he's trying to start a business about creating communities based on TLDs for influencers, I feel like this is his way of getting the Handshake community funded to basically build him a business. So I want to hear Andrew's answer, not Noel's answer.
Okay. Well, so I mean, about that, I guess. Well, all right. So broadly speaking, I don't intend on like I'm not trying to get a business funded. I'm not looking to take on a new project. I am on a ranch with a kid, and like this. No, I'm not looking to like get a new startup funded that I'm going to run. That's not my intent at all, and it's not.
So that plan's dead. That's not happening anymore, or what?
No, that was never the plan. But going back to like what? No, I mean like if anything, if this plan continues, it would be Noel. It would be Noel that's running it, and I would be kind of helping advise on kind of the strategy of it or that kind of thing. And actually in the reverse, I was looking to fund it. Personally, to get this whole thing started. So I mean, I think it's like kind of backwards almost from the way you perceived it, but that's my fault. I'd never really like communicated exactly how this would all happen. But I mean, that's more like around the intent of it rather than like the actual project itself. The project itself is again, it goes back to like what does Handshake have a problem, and is Handshake on the right trajectory, and so I mean I think we as community members that have tried to get exchanges, browsers, etc., to kind of to adopt, the lack of funding, right, was a serious issue. Right, so that's one problem that this proposal attempts to solve, raising fiat so that it can pay for those kinds of things, and then secondarily, the second problem, like beyond just browser integrations and exchange listings, is I mean I've been in crypto since 2012, 2011. Or Bitcoin or whatever for a long time, and have been involved in lots of different projects, and as have many of you. And one thing that I can say, although I mean it's kind of a weird thing about crypto, but or maybe tech in general, but it's hard to have a successful project in crypto without some narrative tailwinds. And so by narrative tailwinds, I mean it's like something people are talking about that gravitates a lot of the kind of crypto Twitter kind of attention towards it. And unfortunately,
If you're talking about selling crypto people, though, that's not who you want to sell. You need to sell the mainstream people, not the crypto people. The crypto people are a tiny kind of the population. Either way, you're kind of going on this tangent that's unrelated to what I'm even talking about, like the question that I asked you. Were you or were you not starting a business related on selling TLDs and forming communities for them based on Handshake domain names? Yes or no?
A project, yes. Well, so I'm actually getting to that.
Okay.
I'm getting to that, which is, but you know, I think the way you phrased it, I think the answer is yes. To answer first, but in terms of how this would work, there in terms of like why, I'm answering the why influencer community, content creator community part, which is like related to like narrative tailwinds, right? And so, you know, if you zoom out and if you zoom out and look at, you know, kind of the crypto space in general, there is this trend, like the narrative that's been dominating this entire cycle are meme coins, right? And I'm sure anybody who follows anybody on crypto Twitter can see that. And yeah, and so that's, you know, like it or not, right? That's the kind of the current meta. And if you zoom out from crypto to the mainstream, right, which is where I think Eskimo was alluding to, mainstream, the rise of content creators and influencers is a real thing. I mean, look at, like, you know,
I'm not denying that, dude. You just keep going on about things that are unrelated to the question. Again, if you were trying to build a business around that idea, and now you're on board with this proposal, trying to get this proposal going, is your plan to use this Handshake L2 for your business? Yes or no?
Handshake L2. So the plan is for this company to build an app so that content creators can launch coins for their community, similar to meme coins, and build membership through SLDs.
Okay, that just sounds like you're trying to make pumped up fun on Handshake. Like, really?
Yeah, exactly. So you're trying to make this business based on TLDs on Handshake, and now you're trying to add this L2 on Handshake to power this business idea, correct or not?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's to catch a narrative tailwind for Handshake that aligns with what, you know, the crypto
It's just shit coins on Twitter to get pumps using Handshake for. That's literally what it comes down to.
And taking funding to build yourself a business to do that. So, all right, I got all my answers. That's all.
I don't always agree with Eskimo, but I can definitely see the same thing he sees. Eskimo, one thing I do want to ask you because I already know the generalities of it, but I just want to get confirmation. Is for the record, are you against an L2 on principle, or against L2 because you don't see it has any functionality because the core is not ready yet?
I see an L2 as a business opportunity for a business to make outside of Handshake itself, if they want to make it. Like, they already exist, you can already use something else, you could just make another one and call it. I don't believe that the utility's there either, though, so I don't think it would be used at all either right now. So
right now you're generally against any public funding going to an L2, and you also don't think an L2 would actually get used at all, but are you principally against an L2 period inside Handshake, regardless at any given time?
Yeah, I'm against it.
So, you know, I mean, what I'm asking is, like, say in 10 years, there's a Handshake core successful and there's usage, would you be against an L2, someone creating an L2 at the time, if it wasn't funded by Handshake? I'm just asking.
Like I said, if you wanted to go start your own L2 for Handshake, you're welcome to do that, right? Like, I don't think that should be funded out of Handshake, though.
Yeah, I'm just asking as a devil advocate question because you're very vocal about being against SLD, so I'm just trying to understand what exactly it is, just so everybody else understands that. Okay.
If there's usage right now, then it makes sense to have SLDs. Right now, there is no reason for SLDs. Okay. And as for an L2, funding SLDs when there's already no usage for SLDs makes even less sense. So
okay.
You know,
Okay,
it's
now,
always been, everybody
okay,
here has known that if there were gonna be DSLDs, they'd have to be on another chain, right? The whole point of HNS of Impervious's registry, Digitalis, is to connect with other chains in order to do that. Handshake has always been just TLDs, the L1. But Andrew, I want to come not back to the L2 question. I want to, something you had said earlier, and I think I had mentioned this is where the fear is. You know, you had said that, you know, maybe there is this idea of do nothing, but but I don't think that that is the way. I'm on the reallocation camp. My point in saying that is similar to the compromises. Like, are we in a position with V2, because you're obviously a founder, a powerful guy, you own, you know, handshake.org, the Twitter, you know, is, you have control over that. And so I think folks have been scared, just for lack of a better word, that this fork is just going to happen to us. Are you saying, when you say should we do nothing, that if there isn't more than a 50-50 consensus, or if we can't find some consensus on a reallocation, that it's still on the table to do nothing, that this isn't just going to go through, like, you know, against the will of those who don't want it? I mean, and I say that as someone who's pro reallocation, that I'm thinking we can find some middle ground and some agreements and some compromises where maybe not everybody gets everything they want, but handshake is the better for it. Is
I
So
this,
also,
I mean,
I
no.
also
So yeah,
think,
to answer.
I also think that there is a bigger question that since you brought that up, is that, Andrew, if the community decides on a consensus that's against something that you want or your interest, whether you're not speaking them now or not, because frankly you own assets that are at Handshake as founder, are you going to basically force your views on the community and shove something through such that if we wanted something else that's not V2, it's not something, it's not anything that's been proposed, and you're not in favor of it, are you going to hold the community hostage because of due to the branding, because of the assets you own? I think
No.
that's a general, that it's all the same, it's all the same question when we've been asking it, because a big weight is the fact that you're involved on this, and the fact that you effectively own assets as a founder. They're owned by you and not owned by a collective, is a problem in itself, and that politically adds in weight on the fact of what people do.
Yeah, no. To answer, I think these are good questions. I've, since we launched Handshake, we've been deliberately absent. And actually, JJ Joseph, the other Andrew did a few things, but for the most part, we've been deliberately absent because, and the view was, hey, if this is going to work, it's going to work in a decentralized way. And we're going to quote, like, kind of like leave like Satoshi, right? And so, like, one of the reasons I'm been talking about this is, well, also the other reason is like none of us had any good ideas that we had conviction around for what Handshake should do. And so as you guys, probably most of you guys know, we're all, or at least JJ Joseph and I are working on a different project that has almost nothing to do with Handshake. And that's where JJ and Joseph are spending like most of their time, or if not all their time. And so yeah, I mean, I've obviously run these ideas by them. They were they were in favor for it. Like, I think, like, the direct quote that I got for it sounds like, is like, hey, it's a good idea, you should do it. Is basically kind of the response I got from them when I kind of, like, told them about the general idea of the V2 project. But by do it, he means, like, try to gain consensus around the community. To whether I'm just going to push something through. I've told, actually, for better or worse, I told both in a group chat with Andre and HNS Booker that if I don't get those two, which I think were the kind of highest target, highest bar, that I could set in terms of opposition, because they don't want to do, they're essentially in the do nothing camp. That if they aren't for it, that I won't pursue this at all. And then as related to these assets that I control or whatever, I mean, I think you guys are referring to the @HNS on x.com and handshake.org. On handshake.org, there's been essentially zero changes to that since it's launched, and I don't plan on making any changes ever to handshake.org. It's just going to stay like that forever. I think I'm just paying for domain renewals and hosting.
To be clear,
I think that's to the detriment of Handshake as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's not what I'm talking about. Not about the content. I'm talking about the property ownership, the rights of because that represents the brand. Frankly, I would even want to go and say is that whatever we do here, that I would advocate and recommend that that you decentralize and give that asset to the community in some way, because I've actually had a
But how do you do that? How do you give a domain name to the community?
There's actually something interesting. There's something called 3DNS, and it's where some companies are actually tokenizing ICANN domains, and you can have it actually put into a safe. There's a company called .box that's a domain registrar, and they partner, and they're basically using technology on Optimism that basically tokenizes the control, the legal control and ownership of a domain. They become the registrar. Some of what they're doing is being reselling through name silo actually. But overall, the idea is if it's tokenized, then it can be put into a Ethernet safe, and then you basically can kind of decentralize the governance of the asset.
All right, so if you guys can figure out exactly how to do all that, I would be happy to transfer that handshake.org to the community, or let it expire, or whatever you guys, whatever.
I think that's one of the biggest devil's advocate problems is that a founder owns an asset to the brand, and we're having governance discussions. Get my point?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's fair. That's fair. And to me, it's not something that I wanted. It's just like I was just, I think I bought it, personally, and I have it on my Namecheap account. I don't have it's been more of a burden than anything that I do anything with, obviously. And so, yeah, if we can find a solution for the community to manage it, I would love it.
I can probably take lead on that with Papa, because I've already been involved with .box, so I've already dived a little bit and actually own one of those domains, so I can definitely go and try to figure that one out, because that's actually one. Because I'm not saying you had this thing intentionally. It's just if you want to speak on a devil's advocate, and I generally follow the principle of expect the worst, hope for the best. So seeing all this, it's like, if we're debating on this shit, then it's like, okay,
no, sure. No, I think that's fair. No, I think it's fair. Figure it out, and I'll transfer to whatever, some community solution. Totally fair. Same with @HNS. Actually, since we launched, I have never authored a single tweet on it @HNS. I think we bought @HNS. It's a 33 character Twitter name. I think they're pretty rare. And I think I paid money from whoever had it, and put it and attached it to my email address. But I've not authored a single tweet on that, or post, or whatever they're called these days. And I've actually, since launch, I don't remember exactly what we did with it. I think Caleb or someone else in the community was tweeting on it, using some TweetDeck or something like that. And then some people, it got brought up within the community that, hey, we have an underutilized marketing asset. And someone volunteered to tweet on it for a while. That person didn't ever give you permission to disclose who he was. So I'm not gonna disclose who they are right now. But anyway, so that person was tweeting on that account for a while. And then he passed it over, found a what's it called? Found somebody to take it over when he told, I forgot what it was. No, he gave me a time limit for how it was like a lease or something, an unpaid lease, and he wanted to tweet on it. I think it was year, 6 months. I forget the exact time frame. And when he was done, he found a successor. And the successor right now is the one in control of it and tweeting on it. I don't know if they are or not, but like I've just been the person, the kind of the escrow for that, as various community members have been utilizing it. And there should be maybe some governance process around how these people are vetted or whatever. As it stands, various people have had the password for it, and they've all been. We've never had any issues where like someone who used to have the password continues tweeting on it. Like it's just been passed on and on.
Yep.
And if you would like to be next, also, or after the person who's tweeting on it now is done with it, then happy to pass it along to whoever else. And if there's a decentralized solution for how to do that, I'm all yours.
That's very amazing, dude. I appreciate the direct question and the answer. I think that is going to relax a lot of people. Obviously it comes up why it comes up. It was a big part of the BCH Bitcoin situation, the brand. But you said something else that I think is amazing, and I want to bring it back up, and I want everybody to hear it so we can all relax and do this right. And I'm going to take you at your word on this. There's no reason not to. What you said to HNS broker, if he doesn't buy in that you don't want to go through with it, I think that's pretty amazing. There's two things I would say to that. The fact that he's moved off of his hardline position of hell no, he actually said to me, if this goes through, I'm out. So, but now he's saying, okay, well, what about 10%? And something like that, which is incredible. And I think using him as that bar is really interesting, and including Andre in this, because Andre's doing so much behind the scenes for browser stuff and lots of different stuff. I think, and I'm going to stay on this because I think we can find common ground. If we can come together and say, okay, well, maybe we're not going to do that. It's kind of like Eskimos saying about the L2. If that doesn't get the traction that the V2 proposal is hoping it will, can we still find common ground on other things? Is it an all or nothing V2 proposal, or is it we can take some things out and leave some things in? For instance, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, HNS broker was agreeing with some protocol level funding, or that there are parts of this as a community that we can all agree on that we would want the money for. Maybe that's browser resolution or what have you, just as an example. But I'm saying this because two things. There's a fear of two chains, which would be, we don't want that, right? Even my wife, I brought up two chains, and she was like, "Isn't that dangerous? Like, why would you even say that?" I'm like, because I'm voicing the unconscious of the community. So we want to avoid that, but there's nothing necessarily stopping anyone from doing that. It's just obviously a huge uphill battle. You're saying that, okay, if HNS broker doesn't buy in, then you're not doing it. But what if there are parts of the V2 proposal that folks agree on, there are parts that folks don't agree on. Is there a middle way here? I guess, and I'm saying this one because I want everybody to hear this on recording, over stream or whatever, that maybe we should have less fear and more thoughtfulness. This isn't something.
Yeah. So Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many people here have hired and managed, protocol developer talent. But I mean, in terms of the state of Handshake, right? JJ, he's been my partner for over the decade now. Noel was an employee. Matt Zipkin was an employee. All these guys that have at some point, at one point or another, contributed to Handshake Protocol. I've with the exception of Rithvik, I think I've recruited and hired and kind of got them on board with working on Handshake at some point or another. And having done that, like funding, I know that funding itself isn't the single requirement to gaining talent on here. Like, for example, I will say, like, JJ, the reason he's not actively contributing to Handshake isn't because there isn't funding for him. There are others, like, if you look at the Bitcoin ecosystem, there are plenty of talented developers working on the protocol or have contributed to the protocol at one point or another without funding. So, I mean, I think of funding, with Zipkin, it might, that may have been the issue. But in general, like funding isn't the only requirement necessary to attract and retain talented protocol developers. But I do think that's important because if you look at the state of Handshake protocol developers today, I mean, we started off with a lot of good developers. Boima, JJ, Zipkin, in order of like most experience, I would say JJ's at the very top, followed by Boima, followed by Zipkin, followed by Nodar, and then now Rithvik, who's amazing, but just recently graduated from college, right? And he's caught on really quickly. I'm not saying I think he's very amazing, but I'm saying just objectively, the level of talent that and experience we have at the protocol level has come to a very dire state. Meaning, if Rithvik just took a job, we're just left with maybe Nodar, right? And if Namebase decides to stop funding him, and Nodar is not a part of Handshake anymore, then then it gets to a really critical point where no one in the community knows how the protocol works anymore. And at that point, these are points that I was kind of stressing to Andre and HNS broker, which may have motivated him to say, like, okay, we need protocol devs. Is like, hey, we're at the point, we're at the cusp of having no one. Like, let me repeat how bad that is. No one in the protocol understanding in the community understanding how the protocol works anymore. That means if a new developer comes into Handshake and they have questions, no one can answer their questions, that's pretty bad. That's probably as worse as you can get. But going back to an earlier point, funding isn't the only thing you need to attract good developers. Like JJ or whoever, there's plenty of developers that are willing to work on interesting protocols on their part time or whatever without any funding. The second thing they need is a vision, a mission, a goal. Something that this thing is going to do together. When I hired all these protocol developers that I mentioned, we were working on something radical. We're a brand new implementation in Node.js for Bitcoin, and they were all inspired by that mission or that vision, and joined our team to make that a reality, and it was. So what what Handshake V2 addresses isn't to fund some company. I'm my life as an entrepreneur is probably like waning down. It's not what I'm looking to do. But part of the other part of V2 is providing a vision for developers to get excited about. That they see opportunity in. If this were accomplished, Boima, JJ, a lot of these developers that I've been talking to you about are excited about coming back on board and building this thing out. But but going back to Handshake Jesus's earlier question, yes, I'm completely flexible as long as there's a vision that'll get talented protocol developers excited to work on Handshake again. and then I think it's viable.
You know,
But
if I can jump in here, I think that the original, what you said, an alternate Bitcoin in JS, I think is interesting, but it's not why I bought in. I mean, that might have been what got
Oh no,
JD
so I'm
excited.
so sorry. So that was the original Bitcoin team when I recruited them. All those guys were originally recruited to work on Bitcoin, and then they transitioned over to Handshake when Handshake was launched. I didn't make that clear, but yeah, but there was what attracted them to our
Finish my
team in the first
point.
place was that. Yeah.
Finish my point. It's a big departure in vision to go from an alt root zone and certificate authority to a social network platform. And I would say this is the biggest issue. Why would we deviate from what we are? And I think this is even a question maybe for clarification.
Yeah, put it that way, it's like that doesn't make any flip. If you put it that way, that doesn't make any flipping sense.
Well, no, yeah. So the vision, so the criteria for why this idea came about was a way to catch a tailwind on what's happening in the crypto kind of ecosystem, and specifically and actually outside of crypto, with content creators building communities, these digital tribes. And those are pretty heavy tailwinds, in my opinion, in terms of like where culture is going, as well as where crypto is currently. And so, tokenizing TLDs is not just DSLDs, is, the combination of tokenized TLDs with DSLDs. Now, look, if someone can come up with a better vision that meets the requirements, right, of being a ambitious enough vision, ambitious enough vision, and within the tailwinds of crypto Twitter, that kind of thing, I'd be completely
Let
ready
me
to
throw in on
switch
that.
position. Yeah.
I think we've never been closer to realizing the original vision. If you look at the tailwinds, I would actually say the meme coin thing was like 2 months ago. And then now we're staring more down the barrel of true censorship when you look at what's going on in the UK and freedom of speech. And that original vision, it rivals that of Bitcoin. The reason Jahan said what he said, that it could outperform Bitcoin, is because it has that grand sort of vision of an alternative root zone and a disintermediation and a freeing of the internet. I think we're closer to that than we've ever been. And so to pull off that now, it seems like it just seems like bad timing, or just a complete difference. It's just, or a complete change of vision, almost like, well, we didn't succeed at Handshake V1. And I think that this is why I keep saying it works, because it does work. Yeah, we didn't succeed at getting the airdrop claimed and bootstrapping the network that way, but I know plenty of developers that are excited about Handshake's original vision, see the potential in going from 1,500 TLDs to 15 million, 30 million, 45 million, 60 million, and opening back up the internet in a free in censorship resistance manner. That is what got me back in the game. That to me is something compelling, particularly now in terms of a crypto tailwind. So I don't, and this is what means more to me than anything in this. Now, I think we need reallocated money to take that to the next level, right? And we agree on many things, but to depart from the idea of the alt root zone and certificate authority, even if we take baby steps to get there, I just, I don't think we need to do that. And I personally don't want to do that. And I think that's probably more contentious than the reallocation itself is changing that vision.
Well,
Yeah,
so yeah, I mean, I'll add, like,
what I
we're
like,
not removing anything. Wait, hold on one second. Like, we're not removing any of those kinds of aspects of Handshake. So it's an additive function, not like subtractive. It's like we're getting rid of any functions or censorship resistance or anything like that. But I mean, I think the way I'm kind of like, and this is, we may or may not disagree on this kind of observation. But like the way I've seen cryptocurrencies and crypto technologies adopted is it starts with it starts I mean, this isn't just like open source software, right? There is a ticker and there's a price. And so like what usually, like, look, take for the case of Bitcoin, right? It's supposed to be censorship resistant money, whether a store of value or medium exchange or what have you, but it's supposed to be money that's censorship resistant and things like that. Well, like, and what attracted, but if you talk to most people who own Bitcoin today, why do they buy it? Why do they have it? Why, especially especially when if you talk about like people who bought the ETF, right? Why do they have this at all? And it's not for censorship resistance, right? Clearly, there's like eight different parties that can take away your funds in an ETF. And so it's not about that. It's about like basically speculation and number go up. And I think like the way cryptocurrency is is adopted, the path that I see, is its adoption path is that the the price going up basically psyops all the normies into buying real tech. Which if you were just talking about like cryptography or peer-to-peer technology, or anything like that, if that were the message that Bitcoin were spreading, or even censorship-resistant money, I don't think it would have the adoption that it had. The vast majority of people who got into it after 2013 or so probably just bought it because of the price was going up. And so I mean, I think Handshake being a cryptocurrency kind of needs that kind of thing too. There aren't that many people that's going to buy into an asset that has a chart that looks like Handshake. Regardless of what the technology does. And so I mean, I think like the beauty, like it's just maybe a cynical view of cryptocurrencies, but like I think it's using people's greed to basically psyop people into adopting technology.
So basically, to summarize, and I understand. So basically, your strategy is use people's greed to trick them into defending their own rights.
Yeah, precisely. And like as that happened, the price went up, and for Bitcoin, in Bitcoin scenario, the coin actually became more secure and more censorship resistant, right? If all these people that didn't buy into Bitcoin because of greed, if that had happened, Bitcoin would be way cheaper, and the technology itself, the network itself, would be less secure.
I got greedy about the names, right? The names. I put millions of dollars into the names. Like, there's more to Handshake than the coin. The coin, to me, because of the mining situation, which is a whole other variable, isn't investable like the names are. And I think, the greed, this is why I always wondered, why did I have to gift JJ.JJ? He didn't give a shit about it. How is that possible, right? And I think that's one thing, like folks that are heavily invested in the names, and that's where the primary value is, I would say. It's like maybe
I don't think anybody should be investing in the currency. It's not an investable currency, and I don't see it ever as being one.
Well, the only reason you might ever see in the investable is because there's a coin cap. It tries to emulate Bitcoin in the proof of value, store of value. Which, if you want to argue about NFTs and sort of value, you can. But that's really the only main thing that has going for it for any traders.
There's a very significant difference between Bitcoin and Handshake, and has to do with the algorithm and the competition for it and all of that. And we could have a whole other call about that, because everyone knows I like to talk about that because I've been down that road. Even if the price pumped right now, it would regress all the way back down to the cost of manufacturing because no one else can come in and compete for those coins. There's a monopoly there. But the point being, the name, it's not the same as Bitcoin. And no one feels about HNS coin the way they feel about Bitcoin. It's the names that give this chain, or that give this project its value, and that everybody FOMO'd in on. And we have 12.5 million names, which is 25% of the circulating or the possible name count purchased. So to focus on the coin price, there are other variables that if we were going to do that, I would say we would look at. But really, it's about the naming. It's about at least this is my opinion, right? Other people can disagree, of course, but that's where my greed went. I thought, holy shit, this is a decentralized internet, and I can actually buy a top level domain. How is that possible? You know what I spent on that? Bitcoins, right? I spent Bitcoins on those names.
Oh no, you just committed a sin.
Well, I just have 5 minutes left, so or a few minutes left before I've got to go. But I mean, I think I do think, going back to Handshake Jesus's earlier point, I do think it's amazing that the chain is still running. And there's a group of community members that are that really care about this project. So I think all that's really amazing. But in terms of kind of we're I think most of us in the crypto space tend to be futurists, and we're looking at kind of hey, where's the trajectory? Where's the trajectory? Where are things going? And when I look at Handshake from both the talent kind of position, talent perspective, I do think we are in, I think I mean, it is in a precarious position. And the fact, like in any ecosystem, you want to see kind of the talent level going up. And more people kind of joining, and more talented voices kind of coming in, and you want to see kind of expansion, because like the old saying goes, if it's not growing, it's dying. And so I think the general idea that that maybe the first consensus that we can kind of come around is hey, do we want to do anything? Because and the reason I took a hard line was saying hey, I'm not going to do anything unless I can get HNS Broker and Andre on board, is because they're the only people that I've been hearing that are hey, everything is fine. And if so, the community believes everything is fine, then why wait? I don't want to spend any effort changing anything. Hey, let's just if the community thinks everything's going fine, let's just leave it alone. But as somebody who spent a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of capital, opportunity costs, etc., on this project, I don't want to see it kind of, I mean, I prefer not to see it kind of, not grow. That's my principal motivation. I'm not looking to start a new startup. I'm not looking to do any of that kind of stuff. I'm looking to breathe a new vision into or at least propose a new vision that would get talented people excited about it, and things kind of moving on this front. On the price point, I mean, the price thing, the only reason I'm mentioning the price thing is because I think price front, as I've seen in all these kind of cryptocurrencies, price leads community. The price goes up and a bunch of people join. And for basically every cryptocurrency, and the inverse is also true. Price goes down and people leave. So I mean, that's my only kind of motivation in here. I hear you. When you say price isn't important, nobody should be buying this kind of thing. I know plenty of people who were saying that about Bitcoin. Back in 2011, 12, 13, that this is just a technology, this is open source software, that people aren't supposed to accumulate and hoard a bunch of Bitcoin. Those people are all still working today. as employees. And so, I don't, when it comes to this proposal, I mean, that's the chief motivation. It isn't, Andrew wants to startup funded. I could start a unrelated, like one, okay, here's the truth. We raised $10 million for a different DEX, for a DEX that's unrelated to Handshake at a market cap that's 10, or at a valuation that's 10x Handshake's current entire market cap. Why would, if I wanted to start, well, one, I did start another startup that did get funded, outside of Handshake, and then two, that's it's insane to, I don't know. I mean, I guess you'd have to know more about where I'm at, but to understand that that's not the inherent motivation. But it's more about hey, how do we kind of turn this around? I'm not looking for a change in vision. I do think the censorship resistant names, censorship resistant internet is the long-term vision. It's the question as to how do we psyop psyop the entire world into adopting Handshake, and through by catching a tailwind off of cultural or crypto Twitter narratives. And if anybody else has a better proposal for something like that, I'd be happy to jump aboard, support it in any way I can, et cetera, et cetera. But the proposals go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, please. I know you had a time limit here, and
so the proposals I've seen so far, is hey, let's just reallocate, everything into multi-sig. It doesn't come with a separate vision. And I think that's what it needs. I think to get talent, as well as funding or eyeballs or all these kinds of things, you do need some kind of vision, because that's what people are attracted to. And so this is just what, based on my observations, cultural and crypto observations, I think Handshake V2 kind of meets that, but it's not the end all be all. I'm not we didn't create Handshake for for meme coins or anything. That wasn't the end state vision. I'm just trying to piggyback off something that's already happening.
You've said a lot, and I appreciate the questions being answered, because I think a lot of fears are going to go away for people. One, that this is going to happen to us. Two, that there would be something done with the brand names and the branding. Three, that we would depart from the decentralized root zone piece. So I think probably everybody here is for reallocation. Obviously, listening at home on Twitter aren't, and that's good. But so I think I just want to thank you for answering the difficult questions straight up, and I'm hoping that everyone involved or who hears this can relax a little bit and do what you said. If you have an alternative proposal, put it together, right? Write it up. Take the time and put it forward in a way like Noel is doing with the V2 proposal, so that we can all read it, look at it, and let's have a mature conversation about it. One thing, again, I want to bring up, and I don't know how we're doing with the time here. I guess it's 6:01. We're 2 hours in. Is this idea of a minimum viable governance product, so we can even make these decisions as a group and feel confident and comfortable with that. I think personally that might be a good proposal to put forward, and I can take a stab at that, and want to say that I think we lost Andrew with that. But we knew we were going to at some point. That's something that I want to continue the conversation around.
Papo, I have before. I'm not sure how long this call's gonna last, so I have some things to summarize. Basically from regarding the proposal. I guess first I'll go back and say about what Andrew basically said. Then I'll just say for the record, my position is clear. if the intention is to make an L2, this basically is going to try to use crypto Twitter frankly to pump out shit coins and try to use that and try to use people's greed. While I understand what his idea, I don't think if anyone wants to do it, they're free to do that, but that should not be using handshake money whatsoever to do that. Like I'm not in favor of having an L2 just go and try to create some sort of hype casino on fucking Twitter. Like I'm not for that. I'm with Papo regarding the decentralized internet. That's what I came here for, and that's what I'm building my project around. I'm not here for the meat. I'm not here for the casino. So so while an L2 in tech, I don't have any issues with an L2 in general. If the L2 is for that, it can frankly GFY. Like I'm not there for that. Now what I've gone and done is I actually had AI summarize a lot of criticism on the proposal, because a lot of people have actually voted with some of my comments, and I think this is something for the record that people should hear. Generally speaking, for me, I'm opposing to giving any money to businesses or TODs. Like all of that should just be written out completely. If we're going to have any funding, it should go out to nonprofits or a way to be accountable. A VC entity should not be getting any money such that it's in control of the money to make any decisions, because then it's not going to be accountable to the community. You can say trust me, bro, we'll give good vibes, but a VC entity fundamentally will not be accountable to community in that way. So that really can't happen.
Hey, Cryptor, can you mute? I know that a couple people have put that in the chat for Cryptor to mute because we can hear what's happening there. If that would be possible, that would be great. I don't see it muted, but it's quiet.
Are you there?
Now. There it is. There we go. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Did you have more to say, Derek?
Yeah, I have a list on AI that's basically summarizes a lot of my comments. So yeah, basically no VC, because a VC fundamentally cannot be held accountable. My experience has shown that. Overall, I'm open to an L2 in general, but the L2 and what it to be done has to be very specific, and it also needs to be in control of a foundation or some sort of some sort of nonprofit government where that entity can be held accountable. If we're going to build an L2, if at all, it needs to be something to where it's accountable. Like I'm not against it, but the details matter of how that operates. If it's going to be what Andrew basically says, his idea of like pump that fund, no. If you want to give any funding to any allocation for funding to any open source to any project, like there's like example giving to Namebase or giving to Shake Station or giving to Sky Include, for example, is random that have been mentioned. The money that goes from Handshake should only ever be used for protocol or public goods. If you're giving money to a business and that business does not foster code base, it's a hard no. It should only ever be to public goods. It only should be to a FOSS project. No money whatsoever should be given to a business at all. So if you want to actually help the community and get part of that outside anything else, any project that gets money should 100% be completely open source. That's just my hard line on that. Marketing should be decided by decided by a community, ideally through a foundation. Overall, my general consensus is that people should not be giving money individually to the wallets. Like this should be any money that should be going out to some ways where it can be held accountable. Just giving out freebies to people's wallets directly. No, that's just stupid. TLD Federation, I would take a bit of a Bitcoin maxi stance on this and say that the fact that we own TLDs and have sovereignty over this, that is a federation. We don't need necessarily we don't need a smart contract dictating and defining that. Like we don't need any federation like that. We already have it. So I don't see any viewpoint to that.
Good point.
Concerning and if you want to, and if anything that's done to investors, it should be market, but it should probably should be done better, more openly. Like basically, from what I remember, is that no backdoor deals, please. Like whatever is happening, no backdoor deals. Like I've already experienced and see so many places where VCs in control, and it's basically like and it just gets ridiculous at times. So it's like, generally speaking, a lot of this comes down to is that go back to the original multi-sig proposals, because a lot of the core ideas are shared, and I don't think anyone really cares about what happens when the L2, as long as the L2 is done legitimately and not used for shitcoins. And if it is done legitimately, it needs to be very, very specific, and it needs to be done through a multi-sig or foundation. No money for an L2 should be given directly to any VC entity at all. Like if you're just going to go and give $1 million, $100 million to a wallet and to a VC entity, and with the Trust Me Pro problems, they're going to sell it to investors and then go build an L2. Fuck that. Like I'm just saying, sorry, but just fuck that. No. Anything that needs to be done has to be done through some way where there's accountability and it can be controlled, because otherwise you're just kind of you can't. There's no way that we can actually assure of anything that's going to happen. It's going to happen. So I think this comes down to a split between the multi-sig and L2 and how the L2 gets funded. I think that an L2 isn't really. I think an L2 is a secondary priority. It'd be nice, but if it is done, it should not be done how it's being suggested right now. So yeah, and a lot of what I've suggested and are my comments on GitHub have been uploaded by several different people, and so I think there should be a reconsideration about funding, about governance controlling the money, and then the L2 is a secondary concern, because the L2 is almost a secondary vision. Frankly, I think it's probably even said. And it's like, sure, that might be able to help us, but do we really, as a community, want to fund that directly, or do we want to or should that be done outside? Because that could be done, because you can have some sort of crypto casino on an L2 with Handshake and get a lot of Twitter people on there. But it's like, I'm not really interested in that image, frankly, and I'm not really interested in Handshake funding that directly myself. Like. So if that's the idea for an L2, not interested in it. If that's what a Republic of TLDs is, not interested in it. If you want to make an L2 to where people can do stuff and have registries where we'll give people out names and it be more like a more direct version of what HNS ideas, sure. But I think what Andrew said, I hate that idea, and I think that we need to conceptually separate the governance and the money versus the L2, because I think this proposal is trying to shove all that together, and I think there's a lot of common ideas and a lot of common agreement. But I think whenever you throw that L2 in there, you just throw a monkey wrench in the mix, and everybody goes ape shit. I mean, when Andrew just said that about that, what he said today, yeah, I'm pretty much right now. I'm kind of with this is my piece right now. I'm actually with Eskimo on this, and I'm actually against L2. Unless there's a very, very detailed justification and everything and how that's going to work and how that's going to get funded. If there's not that, I'm not. Then L2 can just be on. It just can be. We can just use Ethereum.
Well,
And one last thing, I just remembered. Andrew gave me an idea about this. He basically wants to create a social network L2. The reality is, we already have them. We have Farcaster. We have Nostr. We have Sky. We have Blue Sky. My project is going to be integrating with them all. Handshake just needs to reach out and integrate with our ecosystem. It does not need to be a maxi thing where we do everything ourselves. It just needs to integrate with our people. We already have people dedicated projects that are doing some of these things like a social network. We don't need to do that ourselves. Just integrate with our people. So I don't know why. So I don't see any benefit to that idea at all. I think if you want to do a social network L2 and Handshake, just integrate with an existing project.
Yeah,
That's my that's my thoughts.
thank you for that. I wanted to, and then that may be the L2 may be the far end compromise that the V2 proposers pull off of, and similar the way that H&S Broker made a compromise to come to the middle. I think if everyone's like, no way we're doing an L2, then maybe we try to continue the V2 proposal without that as a part of it, because there are some things in it maybe that we all would agree on. I want to say a couple things, and I just want to check in with Santiago about the time. Just wanted to check in with everybody about the time, because we're 2 hours and 15 in. I think it's been a huge call to hear directly from Andrew on these issues, to hear directly from Noel on the V2 vision, because we've just been living in this kind of scared state for the last few weeks. And in some ways, we can all kind of calm down, I think, and craft something here. But how are we doing on time? Do we want to continue this now, or do we want to come back in 2 weeks and pick up where we left off, or something in the middle? Yeah.
Too bad. I actually prefer this place. Actually, it's a bit of a pain in the ass, honestly.
Maybe do both. Yeah, do both, and that way we can hit different time zones too, even. It might be interesting to do both the mastermind and this in 2 weeks. But obviously, that's your call. Do you guys want to continue the conversation, or do you want to come back on the mastermind? I put in the chat. Go ahead.
One thing I just remembered that because you kind of derailed me. I think when you said that we want to evolve and come to a middle and a handshake V2 proposal, I think realistically what that just comes down to is we're back at the multi-sig, but evolve that a bit and throw in a bit of giveaways to a few open source projects maybe. Because realistically, in abstract, the only real difference is between the V2 proposal and the multi-sig is the fact that is how the money's going to be governed. You're putting L2 in, and then other people get extra money. That's really it.
There's going to be a multi-sig no matter what, but I think there's some questions about, or we're going to hold the money in a secure way, however we do it. But there's obviously some things that we would want to take out, and there are some things that we would want to add. I'm proposing some sort of minimum viable governance that we can sort of agree to, even to make decisions. I mean, it's more than just a multi-sig. It's before we ever even get to a multi-sig. It's how we would even decide on a proposal to begin with. And, so I can write that up. I volunteered to do that. I've had people actually reach out to me and mention that. It's not my brainchild, although I have seen, the chaos and the need for some sort of organization and decision making. And it's, I was asking if we could have a poll on the V2, et cetera, to kind of come up with a way to make decisions. And I think it doesn't have to be long and doesn't have to be extensive, but we should craft this as if it itself will evolve, but that this is the way we made the decision. If we're doing a Cointelegraph article and we have to answer to all of this, we want to do it right. We want, let's assume that this is the basic governance structure over some decision making for the decentralized internet. We're going to want to put some thought into this. It isn't, And I agree with you. It's not something we want to do hastily. And now that we're kind of can feel secure that this hard fork isn't going to happen to us, we can more patiently and meticulously craft something. I really don't know how we're going to make decisions without a minimum viable governance.
That's actually something I have a rough idea on. I'm not exactly. This is something I'm not exactly sure in the details, but I think this is something that you can take a bit of lead on. But this is an idea. You could probably do something either on Ethereum or Cardano with smart contracts, and I think somehow I'm not sure if you really need HIP-5, but my idea is I'm there might be a HIP spec for this, I don't know, but the idea I have right now is that if you can somehow just do a simple link between someone's wallet and Bob wallet to where they have a domain like IP330 on one of my wallets, then you can basically just put in your Ethereum address as like it's an ETH record to link to what has your ENS record, and then use that, and people can identify between who's who between the chains. And if you want to write some code to automate that to verify that, you can to have some sort of check and balance against. Okay, this person vote. Who are they on Handshake? To actually be able to have some accountability of verify who's who and try to have a bit of civil resistance. But fundamentally, I think if you want to have, you're going to have some sort of DAO group where someone voting like snapshot on Ethereum like such. But if you do that, you would want to have it somehow linked back to Handshake, and probably someone host some sort of node server they can return queries about who is who. That's just rough ideas. That's just really basic rough ideas to do that.
Let's team up on that. Let's team up on it, right? I mean, we can team up on this. Cardano's basically a governance chain. So there's voting apps. We could issue a token. We could create a token rooted in HNS randomness. There's lots of things we can do, but let's maybe you and I come up with a proposal for something like this. I don't.
I'm just thinking generally, because my biggest concern about voting is about the money aspect. Like, I really hate DAOs where it's paid to play. I really hate those, frankly. Like they work okay for whenever you're using like a DEX and you're an investor. I get that. But my big concern is that, okay, you want to vote in like a DAO for Handshake to get consensus on something. Okay, well, how do you do that, and how do you prevent civil problems, and how you identify people to know who's who, so you don't have issues? Like, that's the biggest thing so this is just me just kind of giving ideas, because you repeated that like 5 times in this call. So I just thought I would give a rough idea off my head of how you might do something for that. Because I agree that you can have something like that, but it's just really the details matter of how it's implemented.
Yeah, 100%. I think if we agree that it makes sense to move in that direction, then we don't have to do this here on the call, but happy to hear and would love to hear other people's ideas. But I have some ideas, you have some ideas, and we can, like I said, create a little work group around just getting a minimum viable governance system that is part of this decision making and beyond. I'm getting conscious of the time here, right? We're almost at 2.5 hours. Are there other things that folks want to bring up now? Maybe.
Minimum viable government. MVP.
That would be awesome. If we can just put it, like, maybe we can set the schedule. It might also be worth talking about the schedule while we got some people here, because I know you did that on Twitter, but maybe every 2 weeks, just setting this. What I would say is going to happen is that this will become like an anchor for the community. It actually is, in a way. There was no way in hell I was missing this call.
Yeah, same here, frankly.
And so it's going to become a stabilizing force, similar to the mastermind, but with greater frequency and really more diversity of voices. It seems like. So if there's a way to keep this up, I think it's providing a huge public service right now. I
Yeah,
love
so I
your
would say,
website.
I would
Yeah.
say, I would say thank you, Santiago, because it's clear that you're doing a piece of glue for coordination, and it's actually going to matter to keep this going. So I do thank you because that's not my strength. That's not my strength. Yeah, okay, but are we going to have issues getting is Nin going to give control of that? Are we going to have issues doing that
He
logistically?
said he would take. Yeah. Yep. I just think it's, maybe somebody takes a stab at writing it up. And what I said to Nind was, the language is critical here. We want to try to get an objective, some statistics on where people are standing. And that we also want to think about why we're asking that now. The reason we first wanted to do a poll was because I was hearing there was 95% consensus on the V2. And at the same time, the way I found out about it was someone that was adamantly opposed to it. So testing the waters of the community. I think we know now that there are multiple proposals out there. Andrew again tonight was coming back to this a possibility of doing nothing, but even H&S Broker pulled off that. My question is doing nothing even still on the table? And
Nope.
for those, like, I know Scott, who, if I'm putting name to TLD owner, right, the dot wallet owner,
Yep.
was saying do nothing, leave it unclaimed. And so and I've put this in a couple of chats, it's not as simple as do nothing or V2. It's more like do nothing, burn, reallocate with an alt proposal, V2, and even maybe, start with a minimum viable governance. It's like there's lots of conversations happening, lots of possibilities happening. So, if we do a poll, I would just want to be, thoughtful about why we were doing it and what data we were trying to get and for what reason.
Hey, Pop. Hey. There's also something. There's also something else I
That's
was
because
gonna make
Richard
about.
just doesn't give a shit about Handshake anymore, man. He's
Yeah,
over it. He's over it.
Well,
something else something
Andrew
else I'd
made
like.
the point that, Namebase is underwater or not making money is one of the first
I don't
things
think
he
they ever
said.
have.
So, this is why we were using the term bailout, because many
Yeah.
of us know the financial situation, um, and certainly don't want that. But Richard's opinion, I think, is important because of having 90% of the names on Namebase. And, people 600, 700 names on Namecheap. And so people were concerned about his support for something in opposition to why they originally signed up. So
Yeah, frankly, Namecheap is Namecheap. Frankly, Namebase is the Coinbase of H&S. So for better or worse, that does have a weight. One other thing I will say is that it's an interesting observation that I think you'll appreciate, Papo, is the fact that we're discussing even posting anything on H&S Twitter, given the fact that past discussions is huge progress. Because there's nobody so far right now who's screaming their head off saying don't fuck with the Twitter, while we're discussing about posting polls on Twitter.
it's amazing. It is. I really feel like we could celebrate the progress we made today. I feel like a divorce lawyer now or something. But there was a lot of progress made to be able to ask those questions, to get the to have Noel present the proposal so and post it ahead of time so we could read it. I think it is amazing, and I think that was what I figured would happen if we put a huge pot of money at stake, is that the community will come together, and like you said, to see things changing around the ability to post on official, it is pretty amazing, dude. So
One thing on, I guess, to wrap this up from my point of view, I think there's three huge points I think people should take away, because they're frankly big as have ways for everybody. Is one, Andrew, a founder, generally speaking, is not going to a hostile takeover. Frankly speaking, he's trying to be passive. Two, overall, he is not interested in hoarding the assets, and he's interested in letting the assets go. And three, he generally wants us to have a community, and he's not going, like, basically he's not going to use the brand as hostile. So we're going to be able to decentralize control of the brand. I think knowing that, along with the fact that we're both working minors, that is going to have a very different that's going to have political ramifications for people's decisions, and I think that's going to matter a lot for people making decisions, knowing that whatever happens, the founder's not going to screw everybody over, and that we're going to be able to have control over the community branding.
Yep, I agree with you. Great point. Santiago said, let's wrap it up,
Yep.
to make the call 2.5 hours. I do think it's worth mentioning today that Eskimo launched a product on the handshake emoji. You can only get through resolving on a handshake resolver, be that mobile or fingertip. It's a market for handshake, which we've all wanted. It's a global market. It's an interesting, cool idea. And so I want to encourage everybody to check it out. It's on the handshake emoji. If you look at his Twitter, you can see the link, and it's an escrow site. Obviously, Handshake is listed to buy or sell, as well as Bitcoin, Doge, Litecoin, and ADA. And so, we're working on solving the ability to get Handshake moving around. Durandil, I know, he's done a lot of OTC in the past. This is a perfect type of platform for OTC. But if all you have is Doge and you need a little handshake, this would be the place to post it. So,
Sounds like a pun. Sounds like you made a pun unintentionally.
no, but
What I mean is you need a little handshake. But I mean, like how you just sound that, just like it's just irony.
Either way.
Like
Either
the
way.
website.
If you want to divest yourself of some handshake, and you want Doge for it, or Bitcoin or Litecoin or ADA, you can do that. And so that's cool. It's exciting. It's progress. Use of the handshake emoji, use of handshake websites for something that the whole community needs and has discussed needing. So let's use it. And thanks again, Santiago, for hosting tonight. And awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Peace.